Most people realize I've been abandoned by friends and society because a New York agency representing Peter Gabriel and Wells Fargo, Martin Elderman, sucker played me for traumatic memories that were inflicted by organized crime. And they went out of their way to mistranslate. They associated the tapes that they made in secret and the illegal broadcasts they committed with the man who is notorious for claiming that computers automatically mistranslate things. And to prove it, he broadcast mistranslations all over the world at my expense with the help of Brian Eno. His name's Jaime Carbonell. He works at Carnegie Mellon University. None of this is a secret. Putting reality check on it is always very difficult because the stakes were made very high when Paul McCartney and the British began working with a museum thief who was arrested. Now they have to hide everything and lie about everything. But my purpose in this is a reality check, but at the same time to discuss Bush theory. There's a man who comes on online challenges me that Bush was behind what they claim was the shooting of Ronald Reagan. As you know, I don't believe that. You could just as easily make a case that Donald Trump was behind it. Um, I don't think it really happened the way they said he did. I think Reagan was a master of Hollywood. And he set it up with me on the set so that he could play off the script they planted on me. Only two people would know what was really going on. And I, who knew nothing about any of it, was supposedly one of them. And that's where it stands. I mean, but the only person who gets Clint Eastwood or anybody else in the research community upset if they're named as a suspect in the Kennedy assassination is Reagan. You can, tons of people say it was Lyndon Johnson. Tons of people say it was Bush. I believe it was Reagan and John Lennon, who was Frank Sinatra's crowd, with Marlon Brando and Donald Trump. Pretty much the Murder on the Orient Express. They all did it from Hollywood. But and it's a Houdini theory, based on Hollywood magic that Lennon checked out and left the screenplay behind that people were supposed to play off of. Oh, woe is me, spirit, oh, meaning of my generation. This sort of howling and crying shame and manipulation by media. And that's where all of my research has led to. It's not a bias. Most people realize and can be confirmed by my poetry book Hypotenuse. I at first bought into the idea that Lennon was killed, but the more I've looked at it, the more clear it is. The more David Chapman is in prison because of his hand in something much larger, and that he represents Her Majesty's Church of England. So when you look at the details of Sean Straub, for example, in light of the script that McCartney planted on me as a child. You see why I think this, because I knew nothing about it and got blamed for a very complicated apparatus. As a deaf, bad little boy, I hitchhiked all the way from Pittsburgh to St. Louis just to hear Robert Fripp play. And they didn't even credit me for the gesture. You know, they attacked the girl who taught me sign language and had her raped. I mean, it's just bizarre behavior, claiming that the virginity of a girl who was working with Schulman proved I was a rapist. I mean, they can't you're not supposed to be able to think about it. Contradict themselves very well, they contradict themselves. If they're lying, they're still telling the truth. It really doesn't matter if they're wrong, they're right. This is the paradox of preference in media operations. So we know all that. We know all that. Get to the point. The point is that I have a sort of George Bush theory because my father was in the radio room on the San Jacinto. And get where it's like Bushido, Bush I do. And there was this war game over Midori Goto, and she rejects a petition of Bush's little runt of the litter. You see, Dowdy may have been blamed by Bush for the loss of his career plane at sea. He was on the radio and he might have claimed my father was distracting. There were certain things that were reviewed about my father's record, and the Navy came down and solid me on my father's side. It said so to me in a letter of courtesy from them, for which I thank them. Of course, naval administration I've talked to, while rejecting that Reagan could possibly have done what I claim I have reason to believe he did, has admitted that the names Ronnie and Casper being used to torture me in 1973 which everybody in the East Liberty District of Pittsburgh would confirm and know they did, even if they feel inclined because of the hooligan scene around Martin Nordenberg at Pitt to lie about it. They would still say, yeah, well, Casper and Ronnie Zazinski were the ones who were tormenting the queer bait. There were witnesses who saw these people jumping out of hedges at me, slaughtering me blindside with blows, pulling weapons on me, daggers, pipes. They had everything. They kidnapped me and stolen cars and Pittmans. So, I mean, the point is the Navy admitted that Ronnie and Casper in 1973 or 74 would have been known to very few people as the ringleaders of the administration that was going to take power in 1980, Ronald Reagan and Caspar Weinberger. And this did play out on Mount Desert Island where Caspar Weinberger lived. So what the issue about George Bush is pertains to certain kinds of ideological positions that he's taken relative to the school of thought that my father represented, for example, which was humanism. And, it doesn't take that great of a genius to find the evidence for the way the Bush administration responded when Russia lifted the Berlin Wall. Bush administration accused them of being even more menacing, so it was an aggressive thing for them to do. I've always thought that the Cold War was senseless because Russia had saved us from Hitler's Wehrmacht army. And I felt that they would do some consideration, and that, in fact, the truth of Russia was not domino theory, but just protecting themselves, which is why I would never have militarized Ukraine in favor of NATO. They were entitled to some peace of mind. They are entitled to some peace of mind. Like Russia, I do not exempt them from concerns about my research. And here I will explain why. Most people who know me on Mount Desert Island realize I was taking care of a group of people who couldn't take care of themselves. I was cleaning up after all of them. I was providing shelter for all of them with the help of my mother. I was washing clothes. I was enduring really ruthless attempts to unsettle my equilibrium. People were contracting attack prostitutes to come on to me. They were stealing lights from the park, bringing them into the house, forcing me to take them back, find out where they were from and take them back. They were incapable of providing food for themselves. I was helping them by cleaning up after them and by providing shelter for them. I worked very hard at too difficult to find jobs during that season to get them through a very tough Maine winter. People who have worked as hard as I have and who are not subject to the scandalizations of groups of organized criminal like Catholic Worker and Bedside Radio and other scurrilous people from Wicca and so on, who go after somebody like me for ideological reasons pertaining to NAM veteran psychology and psychosis and Clint Eastwood's manias, people who are not followed around by men from the Society for Human Ecology like John Stockwell of the CIA, People who have worked hard like I have, but not subject to those things, will be able to identify thankless labor from my description of what happened. It was all thankless labor. No one has ever saw fit to thank me for any of it. But one of the things I've gained and benefited as a deaf man who had to work two full-time dishwashing jobs to keep up economically with waiters and waitresses who could hear because they got very good tips and they certainly never shared them with the dishwashing staff. It's that I learned that working hard is not always recognized in our society. Laborers, hard workers are sometimes shunned. People who help out peers are sometimes looked down on as somehow um, presumptive. Well, I worked hard. And one of the things I learned from working so hard is the difficulty that small businesses face every day. They get up, clean themselves up, go and unlock their doors and put in a hard day's work. They work all day. They keep good relations with their customers. At the end of the day, they clean up, they close shop, they go home, they count their dough, they sweat and cry over the shortfalls, and nobody suffered more than them in the COVID monstrosity. All over the country, small businesses were closed. My heart was rended. As poor as I am, and as difficult as my life is, my heart was rended that beautiful family businesses closed left and right. They were struggling, but they were pulling through until COVID. They closed left and right. I don't believe that anybody who is as padded as the leadership of the oligarchs in the international review scene, capable of starting wars, has any sympathy or understanding for mom and dad. Sorry, Vladimir Putin. I don't buy it. I don't buy the idea that remorseless, fashionable authoritarianism towards the young at risk for unemployment, for exposure to sad, nightmarish contagions, are somehow falling afoul of the church. What they're doing is trying to do what young people have always done, which is to discover themselves and prosper. And if there are any people in the leadership of Russia, including you, Mr. Vladimir Putin, who I know is a very dignified individual as a statesman, or the United States of America, India, Turkey, Bangladesh, any of you who feel that the human species is entitled to a fair shake, capable of learning from good education, you should put your minds and your hearts behind the COP27 and COP15 movement, because these are the people who need you and need your stewardship and need your wisdom and need your powers and need your help to make sure that mom and dad get by, that family businesses get by, that small businesses are spoken up for, that people who are young have a future. That's what I believe. And I think that George Bush has been deadly to the spirit of any such hope. Absolutely tragic. And the way that Barack Obama felt he had to live up to George Bush is a failure of nerve on the part of America's black leadership. And Hakeem Jeffries, I see someone different. In Jeffrey Sachs, I see someone different. Perhaps in Mr. Warnock, there's someone different. Certainly, I feel that Biden has done a good job. Maybe not in the Ukraine, but overall in the domestic scene. We're dealing with problems that are part of our intellectual heritage. And part of our intellectual heritage is dead wrong. We've been dead wrong about black people when we treated them as inferiors. We've been dead wrong about Russia when we acted like they were mindless authoritarians hell bent on domination. That's not true about them. They're diplomats and they're protecting their own society. And the sooner we learn how to live with them, the better we'll all be. We need to stop worrying about who wins in rivals with China, and think harder about what it means for us all to get along. That's just my opinion, but I wanted to express it.